Hey everybody, so I'm sitting up here because I just woke up naturally a little bit before 5. And by the way, that is Venus, which I never see at home. She is really, really, really bright. Okay, so I came up here. There was a huge rainstorm last night. There's the moon. And everything got soaking wet, which is lovely. Except I feel bad for Cheryl, because she had some of her clothes out to dry, and now they're very, very wet. Okay, so I was sitting here watching the sunrise, and I suddenly realized, can you guys see Venus? I don't think you guys can. I thought, gosh, I should come share the sunrise with you all. And so I'm sitting here, and I started thinking, like I always do. And I started thinking about, okay, so I'm looking at that palm tree. And there are little plastic things hanging from it, which we figured out the other day are the remnants of kites that the kids around here fly often for fun. And there happens to be a kite that's stuck right on the other side of this little wall thing. And I've been thinking about, it's stuck in a tree. And I've been thinking about trying to figure out how to cut it down, because the strings are way too tangled. You can't untangle it. But if I could cut the string, I could take the kite down the path and give it back to the kids. And so you've got me sitting here thinking about kites and trees. And I'm thinking about storms. And I'm wondering why there's so few mosquitoes. Because when I was in Thailand, mosquitoes were everywhere. And mosquito netting are actually like a thing in Thailand. No one uses mosquito netting here. And I've only seen like one mosquito the whole time. And so I'm wondering if it has to do with the difference of the parts of Thailand where I was at were north and inland, whereas the Philippines, or at least here in Boracay, there's just salt water everywhere. So I'm wondering whether the high presence of salt water would reduce mosquitoes, because my childhood experiences with mosquitoes were mostly up in the mountains, and boy oh boy, the mosquitoes are vicious. Up high in the Sierras, around 11,000 feet, they will eat you alive. So that's got me thinking about hurricanes and typhoons, because I'm pretty sure they're the same type of storm, but the storm in the Gulf or in the Atlantic is called a hurricane, and if it is over along the Asian coastline, the far western edge of the Pacific, Japan and whatnot, they call it a typhoon. There might be a difference in the actual storm, or it might just be a difference in the name. I don't know. So I'm thinking kites and seawater and storms. And that got me suddenly thinking about Benjamin Franklin and how he flew that kite with a key attached to it because he wanted to attract lightning in the middle of a storm, because he was exploring the concept of electricity. And I thought to myself, why did he put a key on it? I understand in the modern day. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. You also had people would put these, you have grounding rod concepts. Well, it used to be that people would put something on the top of their house if they lived in a place where you had a lot of lightning storms, and that was supposed to somehow protect your house. And I thought, how was it? Like, I don't have personal experience. I don't know why lightning is attracted to metal or what the relationship is. And I thought, how did people in the past even come up with this random idea that lightning and metal had a relationship? Or that you could put a lightning rod or some such thing like that on top of your house, and it would somehow help prevent your house from being hit by lightning and catching on fire, something like this. And I'm like, how did people figure this out? Maybe when lightning hit a house or a tree or hit something, which I think technically it actually starts on the earth and goes upward, but it looks like it comes downward. Anyways, when that happens, and people showed up later after the event, and they looked at the charred tree or the burnt down house or whatever, there must have been some evidence, something that, like, in the debris left over, something that made them think that the lightning had been attracted to one thing more than another. And now that I think about it, given that lightning does start from the ground and go upward, we think of a lightning rod as lightning is drawn to the rod and therefore doesn't hit the house. But that would make no sense, because if it was going to hit the rod and it's coming down, it would then keep going, is spread throughout the house. Maybe if the lightning rod goes up from the middle of the house and lightning's going to originate at your house, if it can go up and shoot off that rod up into the sky, maybe that gives that energy a focal point and channels that energy so that it moves seamlessly and out from the earth up to the sky without charring the house in the process. Okay, once again, people are thinking things. And that made me remember something about why our thoughts matter and why common sense has so much value. And it's because common sense and our ability to evaluate the world around us has to a very large degree gotten us to where we are today. I think that there's a myth in the mind of most people who live in Western civilization today, which is that before the concept of the scientific method and before the European Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment in the Dark Ages of Europe actually came a few hundred years after a brilliant period of enlightenment down in North Africa and the Middle East, where Muslim society was discovering amazing things. And of course, we could go back a couple thousand years. And my point being that the Western world is largely based off of Europe, in that culturally, when people talk about the Dark Ages, they're really talking about this period of extreme lowness that occurred in this small part of the world called Europe. But we tend to globalize the effect of the concept and imagine that the entire world was experiencing an overall darkness of human knowledge. And we tend to make the mistake of thinking that the European Enlightenment was the first time that humans around the world actually began to gain some level of enlightenment and crawl out of a bare level of survival into this heightened arena of human cognition and complicated knowledge. And a lot of people who don't love history, people who are not fascinated by history, people who have not been exploring history for the fun of it for most of their life, and if they grew up in these Western cultures, this becomes this soft, general concept of world history. And there's these little things that we know about, like, oh, some people built some pyramids, or, you know, the Romans, there was this bright period of the Romans, but, you know, that's like as far as it goes. And then we think of the Romans and we think, yeah, but they were sort of stupid because they built a bunch of lead pipes and gave themselves lead poisoning and, you know, made it so that the wealthier people who had clean water couldn't reproduce because it messed with their reproduction. And then, you know, they collapsed anyway, so how smart could they be? Right? I mean, like, the lack of understanding of history creates this inaccurate perception about the current moment of the day. And this actually feeds into this dangerous idea that we have in the Western world right now, where higher education and intellectual authority figures are becoming revered to the point where even people who were born in America, which is land of the free, what does that mean? It means free from government control, free from church control, freedom of religion because the state doesn't dictate your faith, freedom from oppression, you know, because the police don't have the right to pick you up off the street anytime they want for no good reason, and so on and so forth. Our Constitution is a blend of freedom to and freedom from. And yet, people who are enjoying the blessings of that are beginning to enslave themselves, doing this to themselves. We are seeing people enslave themselves on purpose to the assumed superior thoughts and decision making and knowledge of credentialed experts. And yet, long before the first universities existed in the West, and long before the New World was discovered by Europeans, and long before the Europeans began to crawl themselves out of a post-Roman Empire collapse dark age, long before that, in other places of the world, common sense was leading civilizations to great, phenomenal, amazing achievements, some of which we cannot replicate today, such as some of the stonework that is found in South America, and I think also in Africa, specifically Northern Africa, where stones were moved and placed with such exactitude and perfection, with such amazing, perfect seals between them, that our modern artisans can't figure out how they did it. And so why does common sense matter? It's because our brains, our human brains, are what all logic and problem solving and discovery depend upon. The scientific method only functions properly if our brains are being used properly. The scientific method does us no good when we start to fall victim to the worship of authority figures or orthodoxy. And we have the same mind-numbing effect happening in the Western world today because of medical orthodoxy that tells people when they see something with their eyes and they think it with their brain and they start to suss it out and they start to figure it out with their mind and their common sense, and what they're beginning to realize runs contrary to either the established orthodoxy of the day or the special interests of those who are biased while standing in positions of perceived authority, right? We get human failings and human flaws, and that numbs, silences, constrains, and inhibits freedom of thought, which is really the basis of common sense. Because common sense is the fruits of our mental labors. And because there was some common sense in the past that ended up being proven wrong, because there were some ideas that didn't last the test of time, because there were some of those things in the past, a lot of us in Western civilization are being encouraged to assume that common sense in and of itself is the mistake, is a flawed method of evaluating the world and the universe around us. And so we're being taught to distrust our common sense because it might lead us down a path toward ideas that are later proven wrong. But people, common sense is the root ingredient of the scientific method. Common sense is what generates a hypothesis. It is observing things, coming up with a guess, and then through the scientific method, which is how we explore that guess in a particular fashion, that is the primary ingredient of the scientific method. And so, common sense, our thoughts, and the free use of our mind and our brain to consistently evaluate everything and then go out and see if other people have evaluated that thing that struck our curiosity and who else has discovered something about it. That's absolutely necessary if we are going to continue any concept of forward progression as a species, because the slide into everything from medical orthodoxy to the general concept of I believe in science, which is the most dangerous and unfortunate combination of words, and the literal blending of, in that case, it's medical orthodoxy with a religious mindset. That's what I believe in science represents, at least during the recent COVID years in particular. This is what retards a society, and this type of inhibition on thinking is partly what led to the fall of every empire that has existed before us. The collapse of sophisticated society goes hand in hand with the silencing of the voices that challenge those who have obtained some level of power, which is vested in their position of authority within that arena or sphere or category of thought. Every architectural discovery was brought forward by a spark of creativity. And if you were to shame people for having ideas about how to build better, we would end up with decades, possibly longer, of inhibited architectural development, experimentation, and discovery. And that's just another example if we want to step away from the medical model. So, the title of my Substack is Our Thoughts Matter. And it's not trite. And it's not a simple or shallow thought. It is literally the difference between true forward progress as a species or retardation of the human intellect and a collapse back into the type of thinking that does not serve us. The ebb and flow, the up and down, the growth and expansion of our species, the gaining of freedom and the giving away of that freedom, the seeking of oppression by people who are really seeking to relieve themselves of the responsibility of living a life of decision making and frustration with our fellow people. And we start to think, well, maybe someone else is going to get crushed if we create an authoritarian or a totalitarian state. But if it's me and my buddies who create it and what we want is going to happen, then we're okay crushing those other people because they're not us. And it might hurt them, but gosh golly, if they're hurt for the sake of the greater good, well then their suffering is a sacrifice I'm willing to accept. That's right there, the circular logic that gives birth to the terrible and horrible forms of totalitarianism, tyranny, and oppression that our species has endured over the ages. I really, really, really hope the modern Western world doesn't repeat that mistake. We have so much power that an oppressive totalitarian globalist regime would be worse than any human disaster in all of human history. And that's why us knowing that our thoughts matter is so important. It's like our declaration Yeah, it's the people of the world declaring, we have value and we have a right to not be oppressed, and we will advocate for our freedom because our thoughts matter. And if you oppress us, you will harm the future of humanity because you will crush thoughts of great value. Your thoughts, my thoughts, the thoughts that are scattered across the globe right now. And I think the sun is going to come up at some point fairly soonish. So anyways, those are my thoughts for the morning. I'll be quiet and let you guys enjoy the sunrise. Ooh, no, I won't. It's a really long video. All right, I love y'all. See you later. Keep on thinking.